So we've made an episode in the past where the driver market did not change at all between the 2023 year and the 2024 year, and it bothered us because in F1, seats are always moving. Well, that's definitely changing for 2025 as almost every single seat is changing, and it's very confusing. We have a lot of confirmed spots. We still have some that we don't know where they're going to go. Like, for example, Daniel Ricciardo doesn't have a seat. Kevin Magnussen doesn't have a seat. Logan Sargeant, Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Guanyu. I want to get more in depth on this, and I want to kind of talk about, do these people deserve these seats, where we think who's going to go where, the upcoming drivers that are in F2 or maybe reserve drivers that could get a spot. Let's dive into this a little bit. This is Turn One Podcast. We're your hosts, Jeremiah
and Thomas.
Thomas, what are your thoughts on the driver market as it stands right now and the possibilities that we could see coming here by the end of the summer break or the end of the year?
I'm really excited. I'm scared, a little nervous, a little scared, a little excited. There's a lot of things happening right now, and let me explain. Last year, nothing happened. Last year, the summer break was super boring, and it's because no one changed teams. There was no open seats. It was the worst year for F1 drama ever. And we're not a big drama channel. Those exist out there. We like to cover the races and the facts and the information that's out there. We'll occasionally talk rumor mill, but we still like the drama. We like, people moving around and changing stuff. And so when big things happen, we like to talk about it. And last year was just a horrible year for that because, again, everything stayed status quo with the drivers. This year, we got the ball rolling early with Lewis making his announcement. Way earlier than most driver announcements are made. And then, you have Ferrari, of course, cutting off Carlos in favor of Lewis. But as it stands right now in summer break, we have a really fun summer break that I think a lot of this is going to be hammered out over the next 3 weeks before we go to Zandvoort. I think that's the next race. Could be wrong. Right now, you have 4 open seats. Mercedes has their open seat. Alpine has an open seat. Sauber has an open seat, which is odd because they actually had 2 open seats but already filled one of them. And RB technically has an open seat because Daniel Ricciardo is not signed for after this season. So that's considered open until they either re-sign him or sign somebody else. That leaves 5 current drivers without a seat for 4 spots. And here's where I want you to kind of go off for a second. How many of those 5 drivers are getting spots back?
So this is where it gets weird because you say we have 4 open seats, but yet 5 drivers don't have a seat. That's because Oliver Bearman signs at Haas. And with Oliver Bearman coming in and getting that Haas spot, that's going to kick out Kevin Magnussen. Now, Nico Hülkenberg, he left Haas and he goes over to Sauber. That's that one Sauber seat with the opening still remaining there. Everything gets jumbled around. Sauber, as it stands right now, is Valtteri and Zhou. Neither one of them have a seat. So you add that to the list with Kevin Magnussen. Williams, we see finally the announcement of Carlos Sainz as he's going to Williams and partnering up with Alex Albon. We don't know what's going to happen to Logan Sargeant. And finally, for the final driver that's on the grid right now that doesn't have a seat, my man, Danny Rick. And that one hurts because Yuki is confirmed under a contract right now. He is going to be at RB. But Daniel Ricciardo hasn't been re-signed. So there's speculation there because that's just those 5 drivers. We can bring in other drivers. I want to get into that next, but let's talk about these 5 drivers and who deserves to stay on the grid. Here's the thing.
Real quick, can we clarify? Because you mentioned some of the moves, but just to clarify the moves so far, obviously Lewis goes to Ferrari, so that fills that seat.
Yes.
Alpine still has Pierre, but Esteban was removed. They mutually parted ways. But now Esteban fills a Haas spot. So Haas is completely flipped around. It's no longer K-Mag and Hülkenberg. It is Bearman and Ocon,
which wild.
The Bearman thing, great move by Ferrari and Haas. The Ocon thing, kind of weird. Sauber removes both Zhou and Valtteri. Now, I guess they could sign one of those drivers, but I don't think they will. And so you have Nico filling the Sauber role. And I think, again, RB has Danny Rick. I think everybody else stays the same, but that's 4 or 5 major driver changes that we got none of last year.
Exactly. Carlos,
which of the 5 do you want to start with, though?
Which of the 5? I mean, we can't talk about Daniel Ricciardo without talking about the F2 drivers. So I want to talk about, I guess, I'm going to go here's the thing. We're going to start with Zhou Guanyu, but here's why. Because I have one sentence for him. Zhou Guanyu is gone. There you go. That's all that I have on Zhou Guanyu. He's been
My my
mediocre.
my only case would be that there's still the youth thing. If you're debating between him and Valtteri, which I don't even know if that would be the case to make, but if you're debating between him and Valtteri, he's got the youth angle and was getting very similar results to Valtteri, but not promising results.
Right. So Zhou Guanyu is gone. Now that segue. You segued perfectly just now. I'm going to move into Valtteri Bottas. Now here's the thing. Similar results, but not beating Valtteri. Valtteri is clearly better. He has the experience of racing at one of the top teams. So provided he is given a car that can perform, we can see things from Valtteri. I would say if any of these drivers deserves to keep a seat somewhere, give it to Valtteri Bottas. He's a fan favorite. He's a dang good driver, and he needs a seat somewhere. I don't know where that is. Maybe he moves to Alpine, which would be weird, but
That's
it'd
what
be
I was
cool.
thinking. I think the best fit is Alpine because he's not going to go back to Mercedes. Mercedes is going to go the young angle. We
He's not
think
going to go to Sauber because that's literally the team he's on right now. They could resign him, but
right.
I
They
doubt
could.
that's going to be the move. So he's not going to go to
And
RB.
Alpine paired up with Pierre Gasly. I know Alpine stinks right now, but if they figure things out and go back to the Alpine of norm, that would be a way better situation than he had at Sauber.
It would kind of be like Fernando Alonso on Aston Martin, but minus minus the championships.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the best move for Valtteri is try to get that Alpine seat. If not, maybe try and re-sign at Sauber.
But really... the only problem is Alpine does have a driver academy, and they're a standalone team. So that's a problem because would they not want to go with the youth angle from somebody in their system already?
And we'll dive into that. I want to get on into the F2 drivers and the reserve drivers and everything, but I'm going to finish off with these other ones first. We'll move into Logan Sargeant. He's gone. He's gone. Hey, he's not getting another seat. Maybe he goes to Indy. Maybe he goes to Formula E. Maybe he goes to NASCAR.
Hang on.
No.
Hang on.
No.
Kick Checo out. Logan lines it up next to Max Verstappen, front row of the grid, every race.
Somehow, I think Logan still does worse than Checo. And that's saying a lot.
Yeah, I don't think he would finish a lot of races in that highly powerful Red Bull when he can't control his Williams.
He spins into turn one every single race of the season.
Takes out Max every time.
We'll go into Kevin Magnussen. This one hurts. I don't see Kevin Magnussen getting a seat. He brings a lot of experience. He brings that teammate role that he's been playing for Nico Hülkenberg right now, where he can back up the whole grid and let Nico get a good lead going so he can get an extra pit stop or whatever it needs to be. I don't see him with enough capability to stay in the sport. That hurts. Maybe he goes to Sauber, which would be funny because it would be Nico and Magnussen. But
no, they wouldn't replace Bottas. They wouldn't go Bottas for Magnussen, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't see him getting another seat, and that hurts to say because I do like K-Mag.
I think, again, he's in a similar situation to Valtteri where Alpine is kind of the only fit, but I think Alpine has better prospects than Magnussen. And that's not saying necessarily anything against Magnussen, although I thought this year he was highly reckless. That shows in his penalty points. I think he's lost his touch as a driver. The only issue I ever had with him was that he was at Haas when Haas kept trying to say they were building a contender, but they weren't doing it with the right pieces. I will say, side note, credit to Nico. Nico came out of his, kind of forced into retirement and proved himself to be the better driver of the pair. And that's why he now has a seat at Sauber and Kevin Magnussen doesn't, because Nico proved he could race better than K-Mag.
Absolutely. We'll talk about the final man of the hour, Danny Rick. And I'm going to use this to segue into F2 driver talk, because the thing about Danny Rick is that he's right now at the Red Bull B team, which is a driver development team in Formula One for the young guys. And Liam Lawson is their biggest hitter in the Red Bull system. He's primed. He's waiting. There's no openings, so he's just stuck on the sidelines. But man, we saw a little glimpse of Liam Lawson last year, and it was amazing. Everybody loved it. We want to see him back on the grid, but I love Daniel Ricciardo. And so I'll use this also to throw one more dig at Sergio Perez. Red Bull needs to drop Sergio, promote Danny Rick, and bring in Liam Lawson into that seat. And if you don't, and you're going to keep Checo, which I don't know why you would do, fine. Keep Daniel Ricciardo for one more year, maybe. I don't know. I know what your answer is going to be. I'm not ready to see Daniel Ricciardo leave the F1 grid yet.
No, so the Carlos thing actually, it forces my perspective to change. I really wanted Carlos in the Red Bull seat. I thought that would have been the best move. I guess we'll find out eventually the details behind either why Red Bull didn't pursue him or why it didn't work out. We don't really know. We know that Carlos was heavily going after the Mercedes seat, but that door, I think we saw 3 different times where that door slammed closed and it kept opening back up, but it never happened. I won't go into Carlos now. We can do that later if we want to, but I wanted him in that seat. Now with him at Williams officially, it changes my mind to you either keep Checo or you go with one of these 5 drivers that you've talked about, either Zhou, Valtteri, Logan, K-Mag, or Danny Rick. You've got to move on from Checo. He's not the guy anymore. And I hate that because, again, for 2 seasons, I've defended him being a good pairing for Max, and it's just not the case anymore. I don't know what happened. I don't know if this is just a bad car for him or if his abilities are declining. You've got to replace him. I don't think Lawson could go straight to the A seat. Red Bull tried that with Pierre. They tried that with Alex Albon, and it pushed those guys' career backs by years. I mean, it pushed Alex Albon way back in terms of timeline, whereas if he would have waited a year or 2 to go up to the A team, he might still be there today with Max Verstappen and have a very promising career. He still has a promising career, but it's several years removed. Same with Pierre. He's stuck at Alpine where he could have been the Red Bull, A and B driver with Max. I think a Daniel Rick 1-year contract is not the worst move. I know that's rare to get a 1-year deal in F1. They probably wouldn't do it. They would do a 2-year and buy him out. But do a 1-year, get Liam a year at RB, then move up Liam.
I can see that being a possibility. That's what I want. That is what I want. I want Sergio to honestly get kicked out. I want Daniel Ricciardo to get promoted, and I want to see them bring in Liam Lawson. I'm ready to see Liam Lawson on the grid. He's really good.
And he's the only Red Bull system driver that we know about. They probably have 1 or 2 others that could be competitive. Red Bull's got a system.
I don't see why not. Absolutely. They've brought up a lot of heavy hitters through that Red Bull program.
And
Max, Carlos, Daniel Ricciardo.
You know what the saddest part is of this? We're not even considering Yuki for the top seat.
He's not a top seat driver. And
I think he's very similar. Okay, I'll say this. I think he's very similar right now to Daniel Ricciardo in terms of skill. That might be controversial. I don't know. I think they're very similar in what they can do on the track in that RB. But I think if you're going to move up one driver for a year to get Liam in the system, then you move up the guy that's had the experience in the top seat already.
And it could be the only reason why we don't see Yuki as a top driver is because he's been at the B team for so long that his persona is starting to engulf that. So when you think of Yuki, you think of the middle of the pack or a back marker or the B team. You don't think of him in that first perspective. Maybe he is ready. That's not for us to determine. We're not at Red Bull. We're not making these decisions. Just from appearance wise, from what it looks like, it doesn't look like he would be ready for a top seat. And we could be wrong on that.
Let me ask you this before we maybe move off of Red Bull. Would you rather have Valtteri or Daniel Ricciardo? It's tough because we haven't seen Valtteri's abilities in years now, right? I don't know if Valtteri's still the same Valtteri that he was. He's got to have lost a little bit of his edge. But man, he's a really good number 2 driver.
That's on a tough call. That is a tough call.
I might sign Daniel Ricciardo.
Give me Daniel Ricciardo. And the reason why is because I could be wrong on this. How many race wins does Valtteri have?
I have no idea, man. You're asking me things I don't know.
So Valtteri's got 10 race wins. Daniel Ricciardo has 8. Valtteri has 10 because he was in the Mercedes car when it was in its prime. Daniel Ricciardo has 8 while Mercedes was in their prime.
But caveat or whatever
counterpoint.
Valtteri had to give way to Lewis
in the dominant car. I mean, we're talking like
right, but if Lewis isn't, I get what you're saying. Like, yes, Valtteri has more wins, but he has more wins because he had the more dominant car of the era. If Lewis isn't at Mercedes and Valtteri's the one driver, is Valtteri a 3-time world champion?
Probably.
That's the thing.
But here's the thing: is if you give Red Bull that same car whenever it was Daniel Ricciardo and Daniel Kvyat, Daniel Ricciardo is probably a 3-time world champion. He was the honey badger, man. Valtteri didn't have a nickname at the time. They gave this guy a nickname because he was the last of the late breakers, the honey badger. I mean, he was a fighter. And so I'm going with Daniel Ricciardo, but that is a heck of an argument because I love Valtteri as a number 2 driver, and he was a great team player for Lewis Hamilton.
They're probably going to do something off the wall that we're not even thinking about, which is going to be really frustrating. But as long as they get Liam in an F1 seat, I'm good.
Red Bull signs Zhou Guanyu.
Boy, you really got to question Christian Horner at that point, don't you?
Well, this Red Bull team is really fallen.
So you mentioned some of the F2 drivers. We do have one confirmed, which is Oliver Bearman. We saw him in one race this year, which was Jeddah, right? Saudi Arabia?
Yes, it was Jeddah.
I think he's still 13th or 14th in the point standings.
Yeah, what was it, 7 points?
He got 6 points. He's 14th. He is ahead of Gasly, Magnussen, Ocon, Albon, Guanyu, Sargeant, and Bottas.
That's great. Which, granted, if you put any of those drivers in a Ferrari for one race, then they probably get a better position than him just because they've been out there dogfighting with the best of them. But it's still a funny stat when you're looking at it. Oliver Bearman deserves that spot. He proved himself. He played it safe. I'm excited to see him be more aggressive now that he's going to have the seat as a guarantee versus when he was at that Ferrari, he was really just like, hey, man, bring the car home in one piece and get some points for us. So super conservative. I'm excited to see his actual tenacity when it comes to that young driver trying to prove himself. Granted, he's in a Haas, going to be hard to do, but we saw what Hülkenberg was able to do with that car, so I've got high hope for the kid.
And I hope Ferrari's doing this the right way. On paper, maybe they are. Esteban, again, is a little bit odd, but I'm hoping that Esteban is fully in a mentor role. I do not want Esteban getting in the way of Oliver Bearman's success at Haas in his promotion to Ferrari, because clearly Oliver Bearman's on the fast track to Ferrari right now if another team doesn't come in and scoop him up before they get him. The thought would be, obviously, Charles is going to be at Ferrari for however long. Lewis is at Ferrari until he retires, most likely.
And then they bring up Bearman.
Is that 1 season? Is that 2 seasons? How long is that? Now, if you wait too long, Bearman will jump ship and go to another team. But they've got him. He's next in line for a Ferrari 1 seat. Esteban has to be told, do not get in the way of this kid. You're going to help him. You're going to show him how to be an F1 driver, and then sit back and let him go.
Listen here, Ocon. As far as we're concerned, your career is over, and you're lucky we picked you up. Now, we picked you up because we want you to mentor this kid because he's actually going to go places in his career. So get out of the way and let him go.
And again, I see what they're doing. Like, obviously, if you're somebody that's not as familiar with the team systems in Formula One, you're like, oh, he's going to Haas. That stinks. This is the natural order of things. George Russell spent time at Williams. Max Verstappen spent time at Toro Rosso. This is just Charles Leclerc spent time at Sauber. Like, this is what you do. This is the natural progression. The only thing, again, that Ferrari doesn't want to find themselves in is an Oscar Piastri situation where you have a guy sitting on your bench for a little bit longer than he wants to, even if that is just 1 year, and another team comes and scoops him up and steals him from you.
But see, Oscar Piastri was actually on the bench. At least Oliver Bearman would be in a car.
Yeah, that's true. Because Oscar was doing reserve test driving.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's a good point.
So that's actually a good segue because I'm going to take it from there into Alpine. Alpine has this open seat, and the reason why we're talking F2 and reserve drivers, but I'm moving into Alpine specifically because there's 2 drivers that are being talked about for that Alpine seat. Now, obviously, we'd like to see like a Valtteri Bottas, and it's always a possibility in this sport because you never know what's going to happen until something's confirmed. But the 2 drivers that, as far as the rumor mill and what we're seeing through the media, are 2 drivers that are being considered for that spot is Mercedes reserve driver Mick Schumacher and Alpine reserve driver Jack Doohan. I would love to see Jack Doohan get his spot, but man, I would really like to see Schumacher back on the grid. I'm not gonna lie.
You know, I'm favoring Jack because he doesn't have quite the pedigree that Mick has, but I think Mick showed us what he has, and it wasn't great.
That's tough to say because Haas was rebuilding that car and it was a POS. It was not a good car.
And Jack has a little bit more experience than you might think because he's been in F2. He split 2021 between F3 and F2, all of 2022 in F2, all of 23 in F2. But in 23 is when he got his Alpine reserve driver seat. And now in 2024, he is just an Alpine F1 reserve driver, which means he's driving that F1 car a lot.
Yeah, but not as
And
much
they
as
still like him.
having the seat, which is what
I
Mick
know,
did.
but Mick showed us what he could do in a seat. And if the fact that they're keeping him on for this long in the system and he's getting some real buzz right now, that shows they like what they see.
It's tough. Mick Schumacher, I'm seeing in the media right now that he's doing test runs for Alpine, and clearly they're trying to narrow down what they're going to do. I think my vote ultimately goes to Mick Schumacher, but I'm not going to be mad in either choice if I'm being completely honest.
I just want the younger drivers that haven't had a shot yet. I think we recycle F1 drivers so much.
I just
the,
think Mick
the,
Schumacher didn't
the
have a
fact
fair
that
shake.
Haas recycled both Magnussen and Hulkenberg. Their whole team was recycled drivers that had been cut for 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah. It's like I said, I just think Mick didn't get a good fair shake at Haas. I think he was on a terrible team with a terrible car. And I would like to see him get a chance at a team that's absolutely not terrible, even though if you're looking at Alpine stats for this year, you might say otherwise. But I'm assuming they're going to go back to their role as a middle of the pack team. And I would like to see Schumacher in that car. But as I stated, I would not be mad if it's Doohan. Doohan has a pedigree, and he's been waiting.
So, moving on from them, I know there's at least one other young up and comer driver that has a spot or a chance at a seat this year, although I don't know where it would be other than the Mercedes seat. It's Kimi Antonelli.
That's what my next point was going to be. So we're moving into Mercedes now. Mercedes is the spot that everybody wanted. Carlos Sainz wanted. Obviously, Esteban wanted, but he wasn't even in contention for it. They talked.
They didn't answer the phone. They just let it go to voicemail. It's Ocon. No, we don't need to take time doing that.
They talked wild about Max moving to Mercedes, and that never came to fruition. The man of the hour that everybody talks about for this spot is Kimi Antonelli, so much so that they went to the extremities of having the FIA rulebook changed so that drivers, under 18 or now dropped down to 17, could enter Formula One so that Kimi could take this spot. And here's the thing. If they were going to do it, one more year at the 2025 car with where Mercedes is at, maybe it's a championship contender, probably not, but give him 1 year of experience behind an F1 car, bang, new regulations hit in 2026, and he already has a year under his belt of racing with some of the top drivers in the world, and now he's got a new car and he has a chance to prove himself. I think that would be a stellar move.
He has 13 karting championships. He has 5 Formula Series championships he's only 17 years old.
Yeah, they're calling him like the next prodigy. I mean, he's the next Max. Here's the
next
thing.
Piastri, because Piastri won everything that he entered.
Right. Here's the thing, though, is in an interview, Kimi Antonelli said that he didn't even think that he was ready for an F1 seat. He thought that maybe he needed to spend some more time in F2 because he was learning a lot. And for him to say that says a lot because maybe he is learning a lot and he needs to stay down there. I don't know. I don't know where his head's at, but maybe it's one of those things where it's like, hey, man, learn on the fly. Because let's think about this. Max didn't even go to F2. He went F3, Toro Rosso. So I mean, maybe you don't need as much as you think, and maybe you just need to get out there and get into a car. Plus, it's not like, well, here's the problem. He's going to Mercedes. Max went to Toro Rosso. George went to Williams. Charles went to Alfa Romeo. And he's going to Mercedes. That's a tough spot to fill.
Jump.
I mean, we've seen Lando Norris go straight to McLaren, but even when he joined McLaren, they weren't McLaren. They were more like, oh yeah, there's McLaren.
Right.
So it's tough.
And you're going to be, they had Daniel Ricciardo at the time. So there was kind of like was it Daniel or was it Carlos that was there when they brought in Lando?
when they brought in Lando, it was Carlos.
Either way, it wasn't expected that Lando be dominant out of the gate.
It
When you're
wasn't
coming
Daniel.
in, when you're coming in competing with George Russell, now of course they're going to want to push George Russell as the main guy, but George isn't a world champion. He's not a 20-time race winner, so there's competition there. My only thing is, when you look at his record, he wins F4, three different F4 series he wins in 1 year, and he wins two different of the F3 series, which are the regionals. Uh, Depending on how he does this year, I think is the real tell. So he's in his first year of F2. He's currently in sixth place, but their season is about where it is in F1 as well. So they've got, a good third plus of the season to go. If you win that series, it's hard to say that you don't deserve to step up because literally every time you've stepped up, you've won.
If you win that series, it's a guarantee. Right now, I still think it's a good chance, even if he doesn't win the series. The thing about that, though, is we've already seen that. I mean, Logan Sargeant finished in fourth, and look what he did at Haas. We see drivers making a jump when they don't win the series down below, and it doesn't necessarily equal good performance. So that's the only part that really makes me nervous. I mean, like you said, Antonelli's in seventh right now.
Zero time as a reserve driver in F1. That's the other concern.
I will say he has won a race. He won Budapest.
Yeah, good, as he should.
Which is crazy.
He's been in the Mercedes system since 2019, but that doesn't mean that you're in an F1 car every day. That's why they put those guys in those reserve seat spots. Either they put them in a reserve seat spot either while they're driving F2 or as a standalone, hey, you're just our reserve driver, which is, again, what we saw with Piastri and what we've seen with a large majority of F1 drivers. They have some time as a reserve driver. Maybe not him, though. Didn't see it with Max.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough. We're gonna see how it folds out. I'm rooting for him. I think that would be a really cool fit. Clearly, George is still going to be the guy at that team, and they're gonna pull all things towards George while Kimi gets his feet under him.
Because who else goes to Mercedes? I mean, the only person I would see them signing,
Zhou Guanyu.
No, is Valtteri. I know.
Bring Valtteri in for a year
and just be George's partner.
Put but then Kimi Antonelli, it's not like he would go to Williams, so
have him be your reserve driver.
Yeah,
F2 and reserve driver, the natural order of things.
So he would be an F2 and he would get some time behind the wheel of an F1 car.
So he would kind of tank his F2 season, but he would still be racing F2, but he'd be the reserve driver.
I wouldn't be opposed to it because then he'd be able to see Valtteri Bottas and we'd be able to see Valtteri Bottas back at the top of the grid, and that would be super awesome. But I think the natural move here that's going to end up taking place is Kimi to that Mercedes seat for 2025. Give him 1 year in that car as kind of a throwaway season so that he has experience racing the top guys. And then 2026, new regulations. Now let's see what you got.
There's one more scenario that we didn't get to, which is their current feeder system of F1 drivers, which is the Mercedes feeder series currently consists of Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon.
Oh, you mean Williams?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe next year move up Albon and put Antonelli at Williams.
So Antonelli to Williams, Albon for a year or two at the Mercedes 1 seat. That's more realistic, I think, than signing Valtteri, and that's probably more realistic than signing Antonelli straight to the A team.
We've seen crazier things though, so I'm still hoping out for Antonelli straight to Mercedes.
And I think you made the best argument there, which is, hey, we've got a big regulation dump coming in 2026. This year doesn't matter.
Exactly.
George is going to win us some races this year. Maybe we'll get a top 3 in the constructors. Maybe not. You're here for next year.
Exactly. Get some experience under you fighting with literally the best drivers on the grid in the world. And 2026 will hit it hard with a new car.
Okay. Is that all the people you want to hit on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody else is ready. And if they are ready, it's one of those things where they're hiding in the shadows and they really haven't been brought to the forefront of the media.
We've seen a lot default to IndyCar. The formula drivers that don't get an F1 seat after a couple of years, they're going to Indy.
Oh yeah, that's where Logan Sargeant's going.
I mean, yeah, they're all moving over there. So I don't think again, they kick tires too long in the Formula Series and no F1 seat opens up. Like last year, not a single seat opened last year. What?
That's the part that bothered me. And you're right. We still do have Teo Porcher that nobody's brought to any conversation in the rumor mill for one of the seats.
Because he's 38 years old now.
No, he
used to be a 19-year-old young up-and-comer.
He's still very young.
He's Nick DeVries.
He's nowhere near Nick.
Who's signing Nick DeVries? This kid needs a seat.
Nobody's signing Nick DeVries.
I really hope Ollie Bearman. I hope Ollie Bearman doesn't have the Nick DeVries career arc where you have one really good race in a season, then they bring you in and you just absolutely mess it up.
Teo Porcher is 20 years old.
Yeah, he's never going to see an F1 seat.
That's so bad.
Okay, well, let us know in the comments. What is the Mercedes action plan here? Are they going Antonelli straight to the A team, or are they rolling up with Alex Albon or Valtteri Bottas?
Guys, if you agreed with my previous point and they need to bring Zhou Guanyu to Mercedes, they could make some serious moves. Nothing good would come of it, but it'd be funny.
Moves into the wall. We'll see ya.
Bye, guys.